papers that I've read on this subject have been well written and well researched, and I love reading what our male theologians are writing on this subject. They are well educated. It has been a privilege and a blessing to sit at their feet through 10 different courses through my master's coursework. I've taken classes from profs at MLC. I've taken classes from profs at SEM, and it is amazing how much I have learned and how much they have taught me. But they don't think about it in the same way that we do because they're not in that situation. And so therefore, it's very, very easy to say, okay, these are the places where women can't serve. Can't is not always the best word. There are absolutely, for sure, places that women can't serve. Women can't be pastors. That's the great one to start. Women can't be pastors. There are other places where perhaps it is better for women to not serve for a variety of reasons, such as building up the body of Christ. But those are not can't situations. Those are should not situations. And you have to be really careful to differentiate between can and should, because otherwise we risk mixing principle and application, going all the way back to what we talked about at the very beginning. My example for this is the congregational structure at St. John's, And when I was writing my thesis, I was going through a couple of thought experiments. And one of them was, can a woman serve on the board at St. John's? It's a standard congregational structure model. We've got an executive board, we've got a coordinating council, and then we've got a variety of different boards underneath. So if you're at a larger congregation, it's pretty standard. We have a voters assembly. There's nothing odd or weird about it. Can a woman, that was what I was asking, can a woman serve on a board? And in particular, I was asking, can a woman serve on the board of outreach? Because that one I am familiar with. And I sit as an advisory member, as communications coordinator, so can a woman serve on the board of outreach? If you read our Constitution and bylaws, it will say no. It will say that male communicant members who are at least 18 years old are the ones who can serve on boards. That's what the Constitution says, male communicant members who are at least 18 years old. If you look at the actual responsibilities of the board, and my pastor concurs after talking through this, there is nothing that says a woman cannot serve on the Board of Outreach. Or put another way, there is nothing inherent about the Board of Outreach that violates headship if a woman were to serve in that way. But we don't differentiate. And that's why this is really hard for someone coming in and reading the Constitution and saying, okay, male communicant members of 18 years old, well, how does headship play into that? It doesn't. It doesn't, because women could serve in that way without violating headship. There's probably examples at your local congregation as well. just need to identify them and figure out what they are. So, can and should. Should I serve on the board of outreach? I'm going to say no. I don't think I should. And there's a variety of reasons for that, including that we have an excellent opportunity to develop male leadership and build them up. This is a great place for them to be able to serve in the church. And we are in the Milwaukee area, so we would need to do some explaining to other congregations. That's not a deal breaker. I'm not saying any of that is a deal breaker. But I'm saying for right now, for the current situation, I don't think it's best for me to serve on the board of outreach. I shouldn't, but I can. That's the difference. You have to be separating those two because they can have different answers. And it's okay if they have different answers as long as we are clear about the fact that headship does not come into should situations. In addition, and this is why it's really important, once again, to differentiate between can and should, between principles and applications, because a can situation is a biblical principle. If the answer to can a woman do this is no, that answer is never ever going to change. And that's good. That's right. That's the way that it should be. That's what a biblical principle is. Number timeless, written the same way in Paul's day as it is now, as it will be 2,000 years from now. If the answer to the can is no, the answer to the can will always be no. That's fine, I'm fine with that. If the answer to the should is no, that answer can change. And what that means is that we should revisit that conversation now and again. We should revisit it as time goes along. We should revisit it as locations change. We should revisit it as church polity changes. And so knowing whether it's a can situation or whether it's a should situation goes a long way toward properly understanding why the role of helper is not necessarily as restrictive as we sometimes sometimes make it out to be. Am I making sense with can and should? Okay, this is when I was writing my thesis, this is a brainstorm moment. I had conversations with a couple other people, and they're like, well, yeah. I'm like, okay, now I have to write it down coherently. So you're the first people that I actually talked about this coherently to. Thank you for letting me talk about that. That's huge. That really is. And that has made it so much better for me. It's really interesting. Are there should situations that the answer is no, a woman shouldn't serve here? And I think the answer should be yes. Yeah, I'm opinionated enough that I'm going to think that. And so then I can work to change those situations in love, in working together with the members of my congregation. But it's so helpful to know that it isn't because of headship. It's not. It's because of other considerations, how we're walking together as a synod, how we're building up the body of Christ. It's not headship. And those should situations are not headship. That's super important. Okay, in the 8 minutes I have left, boy, I allotted myself time for this. Yeah. For us today in secular society, remember I said I was punting a little bit on the home? Yeah, I'm going to punt a little bit on secular society also. So it's tricky. Yep, it is. We live in an unbelieving world. We absolutely live in an unbelieving world. And we live in an unbelieving world that does not respect or understand, even I would say, biblical principles. Especially biblical principles that clash with the way the world views gender. Right? We are so far out of step with the world on the way that we view men and women, head and helper. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That is not a bad thing. But in our society today, we are so far out of step with this. And so my encouragement would be, do not start a conversation with an unbelieving friend by talking about roles of men and women. Maybe not the best place to start, perhaps. If you have an unbelieving friend, or even a friend who belongs to a different denomination, chances are it's going to come up at some point in time, and that's fine, and that's good. And they've had conversations of this. But it's hard because there is not, going back to the beginning, an agreement on the principles. And so that makes the conversation really, really, really hard to have. It also makes the conversation really hard to have when we ourselves are trying to figure out what we're going to do to live out our helper role. We're not necessarily going to be able to explain to an unbelieving world why we are choosing to live out our helper role in the way that we are. That's not easy. That absolutely is not easy. And it becomes even more difficult because, once again, we're in the realm of applications. And therefore, what you do might look different than what the woman sitting next to you is going to do. That is fine. That is not a problem. As long as you are in agreement on the biblical principles, and as long as you are striving to fully carry out your role in the best way possible, it is fine that you carry it out differently. There is nothing wrong with that. But that makes it much harder to explain to an unbelieving world that does not have an understanding of head and helper. Much harder. Like I said, it's going to look different for each and every one of us. And once again, that is fine. we're fully dealing with applications. We are absolutely dealing with applications. And so my encouragement here is, A, I'm punting, figure it out, because it looks different for everybody. And so I can't stand up here and tell you what to do. I can give you the background, and that's why we spent the first half an hour talking about principles and applications. I can give you the background to make informed decisions, to think about how you are thinking about HUD and how you are thinking about helper. But I can't tell you how to live it out in your life because A, I don't know your situation, but B, I don't know your comfort with can and should. And that's fine. You can have a different comfort level with can and should than somebody else. That's fine. But remember to not judge and to not assume. Just because you're doing it differently than somebody else, that's fine. Don't assume that they have a disregard for the roles of head and helper. Don't assume that they are so fully immersed in their helper role that they can't see past it. It's the spirit. It's the spirit in which we assume our role. And so just some overarching considerations. This is the best I can do. I'm not punting, I'm sorry. But just a couple. Are we leading? Remember that leadership and authority are not synonymous. You can have leadership, you can be given a leadership position, you can have leadership tendencies without having authority. So there are absolutely ways to lead without having authority. Now that said, I'm certainly not saying you can't have authority in secular society either. No. There are going to be plenty of situations where you have authority and have authority over men. If that's something that you choose to do, that's great. That is absolutely fine. Not a problem. But don't equate those two things together. They are different. Both play out, and they play out a little bit differently. They both play out. Again, having authority, this is up to you. We are not dealing with the church, and I am absolutely not going to say that a woman cannot serve as a CEO. I am not saying that. I think 40 years ago we would have as a WELS, and I don't think we do anymore, which is great. But I'm also not saying that every Christian woman should aspire to serve as a CEO. Those are two broad ends of the spectrum, and neither is correct. It is what are the principles, what are the applications, how can I best live out my helper role, how can I bring the light and salt that I am to this sin darkened world, and that might look different for everybody. So these are things to think about, but they are not a one-size-fits-all, for sure. Again, that means attitude is key. Attitude is absolutely, absolutely key. Knowing what your attitude is in terms of, yes, I am a helper, and I'm going to respect that, but I am also a Christian, and I am going to think about how I reflect my faith in a world that does not believe, while still living within my helper role, whatever that might possibly look like in today's society. So understanding how everyone is going to arrive at this differently, that's fine. That is totally fine. You can absolutely arrive at these places differently. But once again, don't judge and don't assume. Just because someone's doing something different doesn't mean they're wrong. And that is fine. That has been a lot of conversation. When I teach math in my classes with my students, generally speaking, what I will do at the end of class is say, what were the most important things for today? So, I have 2 minutes, but I have a little more than that because we started late. I'm going to give you 4 minutes and come up with the most important things that you want to do as a takeaway. You can think about it if you want as framing this in terms of 3 questions, and I don't have them up here, I'm sorry. What? So what? Now what? What? What'd you learn? So what? Why is that important? Now what? What are you going to do with it? I'll give you mine at the end. What? So what? Now what? Just a couple minutes. Take 2 or 3 minutes. What? So what? Now what? Here's mine, and then I'm going to finish with one more thought. What's my what? My what is principles and applications. That is my absolute first and foremost what. Principles and applications and a firm understanding of what is a principle, roles of head and helper, and what is an application, how those play out in our society. So what? What do we do with those? Why does it matter? Why do those matter? Because they still apply today. Because they do still apply today, albeit imperfectly, albeit not the way we would want them to, because we understand that head and helper is a timeless biblical principle, it does still apply today. Now what? Here's the fun part. The now what is how does this play out in our homes, in our churches, in society, for each and every one of us. And having those conversations with your spouse, with your pastor, with your congregation member, with maybe someone in society after you've talked about everything else religious and then gotten to this. We'll do this first. But having those conversations is huge and beneficial, open and honest dialogue is my now what. Here's my last thing. My title is Faithful Stewards Living Out Our Helper Role. And you might feel a little cheated because I have given you virtually no advice on how to live out your helper role for you specifically today. Not so much. I pretty much did not tell you anything you should or should not be doing. But we laid the groundwork. And the reason that's important is because it looks different for everyone, and that is okay. That's the takeaway that I want to have you come away with. We can agree on the roles of head and helper and what those entail. Everything else is going to look different, and as long as we are striving to live faithfully within our roles and build up the body of Christ, it can look different. So, yes, I cheated you because I didn't tell you how to faithfully live out your helper role. But I can't, because this is something that you need to figure out for your own personal situation. I can tell you what it looks like for me. I did a little bit. This is your challenge. What does it look like for you, and how do you faithfully be a faithful steward, faithfully live out your helper role? That's your homework. That's your assignment. That's what I can't help you with. Thank you so very much for letting me talk about this, and especially letting me cheat you a little bit. But now you have things to think about and do, and hopefully those are interesting to you. Thank you.